Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here on Continual. Today we're talking about the psychology of music in the show, both for the characters and for the viewers. But before we dive into that, I'd love to have my wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with you, Travis.
I am Dr. Travis Langley, Distinguished Professor of Psychology at Henderson State University, best known as the author of the book Batman and Psychology, A Dark and Stormy Night, editor and head nerd of The Herd on a dozen other books, such as Supernatural Psychology, Roads Less Travel, which other fine folks in this discussion joined me on. You've seen Lynn's name on there too.
And Lynn.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Zubernis. I'm a clinical psychologist and a professor at Westchester University, and a lot of my research is on fan studies, and a lot of that is on the fandom of Supernatural, which is also my favorite show. My most recent two books after Supernatural Psychology that I did with Travis were written with the actors and the fans of Supernatural. So those are Family Don't End with Blood, and then to celebrate the ending of the show, There'll Be Peace When You Are Done.
And Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Nylander. I teach English at the small, tiny little college in the desert in Barstow. And we're right off Route 66. So I am perfectly in tune with that. Before I went into academia, I was in radio broadcasting for 15 years full time, and then I continued to play at it and dip my toe on the air every now and again. And so I spent a lot of time with music and pop culture and all of that. And so being able to bring that into my academic life is wonderful. I also have a book to share. My writing partner Mandy and I, yes, we wrote Death and Supernatural. Well, we contributed to it. It's a group of essays that talk about how the show personifies, represents, and deals with death. And Mandy and I were so grateful to have a couple of panels with you, Gail. Thank you so much. Those were wonderful, and we had a great time.
I've never had so much fun talking about death as we did in those two panels with you and Amanda and Lynn. So yeah, that was a blast. And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, near future post-apocalyptic books and more. And as Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance, but all of the modern worlds are ones Sam and Dean could walk right into and feel right at home. I also was very fortunate to be able to write a chapter for There'll Be Peace When You Are Done. And I run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook when I'm not here on Continual. So yeah, I kind of went down the rabbit hole and haven't stopped falling. Which brings us back to the topic of music and Supernatural. Let's start with the music that the characters are listening to or reacting to in the show itself, or what the music means to them. Susan, let's kick this off with you.
Well, you know what I think is really interesting about the way that Supernatural uses music in the show is often music is used to place, the characters, the situations. If you're watching a movie in the 70s, the music in the 70s is going to help place you. They do that a couple of times with the Allman Brothers Band when Dean goes back in time, back to the beginning, and he's in 1973 and he's in that diner, and the Allman Brothers Ramblin' Man is playing, which they also used in the pilot episode in a non-placement way other than, hey, it's a road show. But often that's what it happens, is to set the scene, to place us in that particular time. But Supernatural uses all of this classic rock from the 60s, 70s, 80s in a time period that is not 60s, 70s, 80s primarily. So what it does, I think, for placement, it's to say something more about the characters, about who they are, how they live, what they're doing. I mentioned in the pilot, they use Ramblin' Man from the Allman Brothers in the scene. They're at a gas station getting road food. Sam is going through cassettes in the box there, and Ramblin' Man from the Allman Brothers is playing. And so that, even without a bit of dialogue, says, hey, this is a show set on the road, and the music adds to that, I think. But the classic rock certainly goes to the characters and says so much about the characters, not necessarily the place and the scene, if that makes sense.
Sure. Lynn?
I was thinking of the scene that Susan was just talking about. And I think one of the things that is interesting, I don't know if I would have thought this watching it the first time, but it also kind of evokes sort of Dean's connection to his dad. Dean identifies with his father and with the time period and the music that his father would listen to, and the fact that it is on cassettes, and the leather jacket that he wears. So I think that music, it really evoked that pull that had for Dean. And Sam even comments on it. Sam is sort of like, these are the greatest hits of mullet rock. Like, why are you still listening to that? But it really does show how we use music as humans to remember and to connect very directly. And the way our brain processes music, it connects us to a different time and place very directly, like through the limbic system. And I think Dean really likes that connection to his dad. And we feel that too when we listen.
Travis?
Well, Lynn just took a whole lot of my answer.
Sorry.
Great minds. I think related to that, it can also reflect Dean's resistance to change, very much so. That's even in there when Sam's commenting about him listening to the same small number of song and cassettes over and over. Dean is, and you look at what's in those. It's you got the hard bass. It's ass kicking music. It is music about roaming, wandering, and aggressiveness, and there's loneliness reflected in a bunch of those too. And you really get to paying attention. There's repeatedly this need for redemption in a lot of these. Those kind of things are fall into why one particular song is the unofficial anthem for the series.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, with John, those songs remind him of his courtship with Mary before everything went wrong, happier days. So what he's hearing in those songs is giving him a very different mental lift than what Sam or Dean get from hearing those songs and what they experience and match with it. Because Lynn's right, we can hear a song and immediately be brought back to a time and place so vividly. And so I think it's interesting realizing that all three of them are listening to the same music in the car, but they're all getting something very different out of it in terms of comfort and support.
And Dean's insistence on how he listens to it. He wants the cassettes. You better not sneak an iPod into Baby. It's he has this resistance to being part of this modern technological age. Aside from the tour of the tool of the phones, he computers. No, it's very much in his preferences in music.
Well, it was interesting. I actually read a fan fiction where somebody commented on the bit about him being angry about the iPod. And from Sam's point of view, Sam suggesting that Sam put the iPod in because he couldn't stand to be in silence without Dean, but he also couldn't stand to hear Dean's songs. And I went, okay, just cut my heart out. That makes so much sense. And of course, right over Dean's head as soon as he saw the iPod. But it's a very Sam thing to do. Go ahead, Susan. You look like you're.
Well, I was just going to talk about, we kind of touched on associations, and we go from association to association almost in a stream of consciousness when we're listening to music. And yes, it can it's so evocative, and it can put us right back in those moments. Mandy and I both talk about the fact that Carry On Wayward Son, and especially me, because I was alive and a teenager when it was a current song. And so I have a completely different set of associations with that song that got written over once I, got sucked into Supernatural. And so I have I can straddle two different sets of associations. But I think, yeah, music tends to do that. It's very evocative of, like Lynn was saying, put you back in that moment. And, almost like it's Mary tells when the scene when she first comes back and she talks about meeting John for the first time. And one of the things she mentions to him, or that actually Dean's telling her their story, is that, well, you thought he was cute and he knew all the words to the Led Zeppelin songs. And so, yeah, she and John had Zeppelin as, that link. And so that has to mean, well, and Dean's favorite couple of songs are from Zeppelin. So I think that again speaks to that connection that he has to his parents through that music that was out before he was born.
Does Dean listen to anything more recent than Mary's death?
Bon Jovi.
Yeah, who rocks on occasion. AC/DC. There's some music in the 80s from AC/DC. So
well, and Styx. Renegade would be later.
Well, but Renegade, well, that was actually outside of. Well, no, he has to know Styx, right? Because he argued with the dog about Styx. He's Mr. Roboto.
Even those, though, are not, anything that is in the, in close to 2021. I mean,
he does sing. He does sing Taylor Swift.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Well, yeah, his 14-year-old self is.
That's the biggest exception. Yeah.
Right, that's Styx is 79. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's back there. Dean is big into the musical nostalgia, but that Dean really values the past, and anything that, to him, those early years when it was him and his mom and dad and baby Sammy, he's got a real investment in that. Whereas Sam doesn't remember those. He didn't have any idyllic early years like that. And Sam, wanted change, wanted something different. So they really do have different value systems around music they listen to.
It's certainly also possible that in those 4 years that Dean had growing up, John could have been playing his tapes or his albums in the house. That could have been a soundtrack to home and security, all those kind of pre-memory memories that get hardwired in from a very early age. So Sam may only remember them from the car, but Dean may actually go before that.
Yeah.
Now, we, and some of those connections we see, like Dean humming Metallica when he's on the plane because it calms him. I don't know too many people who get calmed by Metallica. Not really what people pick for their Zen music, except for Dean Winchester.
Well, there's a few moments, certainly in bridge sections, where Metallica, of any of the metal groups, Metallica is probably the most melodic. And so there's some beautiful moments in their bridge sections where they have some lovely melodies. So, there are a couple of moments, but then of course it comes right back, and James Hetfield is screaming again. But there are some moments. And I think of any metal music, it's probably the most hummable that there is.
And now I'm hearing Inner Sandman in my head.
Yeah.
And of course, it's your own personal preferences too. I mean, there's certain music that it has nothing to do with whether it's pretty or anything. I mean, I can listen to certain things by Rob Zombie all the freaking time, and it makes me feel good. And that's not what you think of as peaceful music.
Yeah. And we develop associations to music. I mean, now I keep wanting to listen to Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms, but it's mostly so I can just sit there and cry and kind of re-experience the finale, because now that's always going to be irrevocably associated with the finale. But it's a beautiful song. It is a sad song. It was a fitting song, but it's nothing. I had never even heard the song before, and now it just brings this like flood of emotion for me.
It was perfect.
It
It
was.
was again another example of the perfect song at the perfect spot. That one was just perfect, ideal. The one Metallica song that they did use in a recap, which was Nothing Else Matters, that was going into season 12. That was, to me, it's not my favorite Metallica song, but the way they used it was really, really well done. And actually, it was season 13, wasn't it? Because it was post.
I,
I think it
you're
was
the only one who's probably going to know.
I think it was season 13 recap. But yeah, that was so well done. Another one though that always makes me think of that was Black Sabbath's the use of the Black Sabbath song. I'm gonna lose my title right now. It was the one with when Mary first comes back, that first episode. And again, it's all of the lyrics are so right on for what they're showing at the end of that episode. In particular, Sam is locked in that basement. He's wounded because they've been torturing him. He's still shot in the leg. This was, and he's sitting at the bottom of the stairs because his escape attempt failed, and he thinks Dean is dead.
Oh,
So
I know the scene.
someone's
Yeah.
coming for him, and as the camera pulls back from him in that moment of despair, the lyrics are, the world is a dark place, you're all alone. And again, it's so intentional the way they pair visual and lyrics. It's just always blows my mind when I see it. And it's one of the best shows for that, I think.
Yeah, pairing, and we'll talk more about the music they aren't hearing, but we are. But you're right, not just matching a great song, but syncing the lyrics to the visual. If you're a lyrics person, that really gets you. One of the other artists that gets featured in the show a lot, but that the brothers sing along to, is Bob Seger and Night Moves in Baby.
Yeah, and I'll be quiet after this because I've been kind of dominating.
No, you're great. Thanks.
But they could not have picked a better artist. He's Midwestern. He tells stories, and again, like Dean says, he's one of the great rock writers of all time, and they use a lot of his music. Lynn knows that Mandy, my writing partner, and I, we do a lot of conferences we do the Southwest Pop Culture Conference in Albuquerque, and every year we do a roundtable on the music, how the music is used. And one year we did one that was specifically looking at Bob Seger songs, and our panel was titled Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll Never Forgets. And it was such a fun one to do because they use so many Bob Seger songs. Mm-hmm. But I can't think of a better artist other than, Kansas, of course, with Carry On Wayward Son. But Bob Seger is just perfect. They couldn't find a better, more perfect artist, I think, to use so many of the songs to.
Apparently, he's a favorite of Bob Singer and Phil Segretia. I listened to, I don't know if any of you saw it, but 3 of the post-production crew of Supernatural did a podcast a week or 2 ago, and I listened to it. It was so fascinating because they just had all these behind-the-scenes stories, but some of them were around music because, when they're doing the editing and putting things together, they'll put music into the cut. And it's music that usually doesn't actually make it into the show, but sometimes, and it's like a badge of honor for the post people, sometimes the production will see what they put in there and say, oh, this is great, let's just leave it. So they all were excitedly like saying, oh, there was that time I put this in and it stayed. Bob Singer and Phil Shagrisha liked it. And apparently Phil Sagrisha is such a huge music fan that he made these playlists for the cast and crew all the time, and everybody had them, these fabulous Phil Sagrisha playlists. So music was just infused through that show.
Lynn, you need to send me the link to that podcast. I have to hear that now.
Yeah. I actually meant to tag you when I retweeted it, and I forgot. It is on my timeline because I retweeted it. It was fascinating.
Thank you.
Well, it's not surprising considering the musician that Jensen has turned out to be. And we get glimpses, although Jared doesn't perform like Jensen, we definitely get glimpses that he has quite a strong musical knowledge himself, and all of them can sing, as we've seen. So yeah, quite a musical cast for a non-musical.
Yeah.
But Susan, going back to what you were saying about matching the video and the lyrics, just thinking about that cut in Baby when they're singing along to the song, and Sam is ad-libbing the phrase in the back of my brother's 67, Chevy, after the Piper incident, just spot on.
Yes.
And that was a true Jared ad-lib. That was not scripted.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it was so well done. And that particular episode, I always wondered, I thought it was interesting. I mean, if they were ever going to use a Bread song, Guitar Man is the one to use. But I know when I first saw that episode and it opened with Bread's Guitar Man, I just kind of went, Bread? Really? Bread? Not that there's anything wrong with David Gates. He's awesome. But I just thought that was such an interesting turn. And I really want to know whose idea that was. I really want to know.
We also got treated to seeing Dean Winchester sing Air Supply. Yes.
Sort of sing.
Sort of sing.
Yeah. He was lip syncing, but yeah.
Singing badly.
Mm-hmm. He had to be. Now we know he was trying to sing badly, which
Yeah.
is
Well,
also
it was Air Supply.
Right.
which is a very soft, chick flicky song for Dean.
Very.
And
although with REO Speedwagon, when Joe plays REO Speedwagon and talks about, she defends REO Speedwagon to him, and then he's listening, then he's singing it later with no music underneath him. He's just singing that song, and so again, making those connections. REO Speedwagon's a little closer to classic rock than Air Supply.
Yeah, I think she puts on Can't Fight the Feeling Anymore, isn't it? I mean, one of those real subtle plays that she makes for Dean.
Right.
He'd never pick up on that, right? Yeah. And then there's Bon Jovi, who rocks on occasion, but the way it's looking back on when they sing it and how it rips your heart out, Wanted Dead or Alive, just changes that song if you're a fan of the show. Travis, you've been quiet. I'm going to pick on you.
Well, the music's not my thing as much, but although, I mean, it was so important when we did the Supernatural book. I says like every chapter has to have a feature on music that somehow thematically relates to the chapter. And I told the people contributing, if you don't feel up to that, that's fine. Just let me know enough in advance and I'll write another one for that chapter. So I was going through, picking songs that seemed relevant for particular topics. And I remember one of the ones I wrote was the Behind Blue Eyes. I forget whose chapter that was for, but I did the one Behind Blue Eyes, the viewpoint character of the song, the bad man, but who doesn't see himself as a villain, but talking about the feelings that aren't showing and how they're better than that. And one thing was this, that we had to avoid actually using any lyrics from any of the songs because we didn't
Mhm.
want to end up paying. I get baffled by Lynn having a lyric in her book title this last time, but because a friend of mine, yeah, a friend of mine once had to pay $1,000 because of using a little bit of not even a full line in his
Mhm.
book, and he got lucky. It could just as easily been 10,000. And so it's like let's we can't use the lyrics. You can say things, you can paraphrase to talk about the song, and you're safe. And you can talk about lyrics if you're talking about them critically, but to be safe, don't use the actual lyrics.
Mhm.
And I was looking at the wording. It's like, man, I came close when I was talking about the no one knows what's behind blue eyes. There's one's like, man, the way I'm paraphrasing that. But the very last one in the book with my epilogue is getting to carry on. And the title of my epilogue is Peace. And it's just so it's my own private joke that I'm invoking. There'll be peace when you are done with the book.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
the music is it's part of the character of the show. It's part of the character of the characters, Dean especially. I mean, music is always a powerful thing, but it fits the mood of these back roads adventures. The moving into areas that feel like most of this stuff could have happened 40 years ago. Not in today's age because they're fighting monsters who are outdated, and the music has always been critical for the part of the show. It's almost a character itself, like a god of music playing for us throughout the entire series.
Mhm.
And fans would have been very disappointed if they hadn't found something creative to do with some of it in that last episode, where they finally play that woman's other version of Carry On together with the Kansas version. Because a lot of fans of her song have been wanting that to appear in Supernatural for a long time. And I'd wonder, it's like, when would it be right? It has to be the right kind of sing because, I mean, personally, I think it's a little too pretty for the song, but it paired very well for what was happening at that point in the show.
Yeah, the Neone version. Yeah,
Mhm.
so beautiful. And yeah, you're right. I mean, they had done that a couple of years before,
Hmm.
and they were finally able to use it. And I think it worked so beautifully there. And it's
It's one of those
interesting.
things. If you're going to do it, you use it right, and
Yeah,
Mhm.
they spent a lot of time on that.
I mean, they always took so much care
Mhm.
with the music. That has always struck me. I just sat down with Jay Gruska, one of the composers, again recently to talk about. He scored both 1518, which was Castiel's last episode, and 1520, which was the series finale. So I sat down and talked with him about the process of scoring those, and just to hear the work that went into it and the care that went into it from his standpoint, watching a scene a dozen times before you actually try to score it, that's not really usual for a composer for a series. But at this point, they really understood how important, especially that last episode, was.
Mhm.
Yeah, that music gets to help define things to the show in ways that you don't with most TV shows, where fans remember music choices with this
Mhm.
show.
Yeah.
It's not just incidental background stuff. Of course, there is some music that's incidental background, but most of it, even that stuff, is well chosen in ways that are meaningful to us. I can't, I honestly can't think of any other show that's done it at that level.
No, I
Any.
can't. I can't either. I really can't. And it also, I just read an article recently about how, I don't remember where or who wrote it. Sorry, person who wrote it. But talking about how, of course, in the first few seasons, they had no idea it was going to go for 15 years. But because they used so much music that wasn't current, the show is kind of timeless. Like you can
Mhm.
Hmm.
pick up Supernatural and start watching it now in 2021, as many people have, and it's not dated because the music is already evoking that other time period. So Kripke really did something sort of unintentionally brilliant in giving his show a lot of staying power because it doesn't feel dated at all.
Well,
They're choosing music that it has already stood a test of time.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
Except for maybe a few things that are meant to be jarring and weird and out of place. They're choosing music that has stood the test of time, and that's why period pieces often hold up better than others, because they're selectively going back to the period and doing and so a period piece can look less dated than something that was actually made during the original period.
Yeah.
I mean, Gilligan's Island, for the most part, is timeless until you get something like a band playing music, or somebody refers to an actor. It's like, okay, we don't know who those are, or that music sounds dated. But for the most part, it's timeless because of having things that are slightly out of date when they're made.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The flip phones probably date the show more than anything, the early flip phones.
Well, and unlike a couple of the other shows, I can think of completely different types of shows that tried to rely heavily on music. Supernatural did something right behind the scenes to not get caught in some of the rights problems that have caused problems for things like Ally McBeal, and has kept them from bringing out DVDs because somebody didn't negotiate something, and they can't bring the show out on DVD.
Well, Netflix, the first season of Netflix is all, they had to swap out the music. So I won't watch the first season unless I'm willing to sit down and pull out the DVDs, or unless it's something like Home that doesn't use any, that I'll stream. But any of the streaming, all the music is changed. And so it really is very, I don't know, unsatisfactory to me. And satisfying to me. So yeah, I'll only watch it on DVD or Blu-ray.
Those first couple of seasons, I've only seen streaming. The show was about 4 years old, so still pretty young. I had repeatedly caught the cold opens after whatever I was watching. I think it would have been probably Smallville. But there was one time I was slipping past, and there was just this conversation between Sam and Dean, just this human interaction between the two of them that drew me. And it's like, well, I'll watch that pilot. So a week later, I've seen the whole series, and which a whole lot of people have those experiences. But so I never heard it with the original music. But there are shows that when they replace the music, it's just jarring. Like, okay, there are some episodes of Quantum Leap that they cannot show because of music. And then there's the stuff where they replace the music, where they replace Georgia on Our Minds, and it sounds so wrong. So I do understand how you feel, even if I can't feel it that way on those particular episodes.
Right. Yeah. If that's not what you had, as your foundation, I guess, then yeah, it's not going to matter as much. But for me, and I didn't actually watch the show from the beginning. I came into it between seasons 7 and 8, and I talk about that in my introduction, why I didn't start it from the beginning. But one of the things I actually caught an episode on TNT when TNT was, they'd run 4 or 5 episodes in a row every weekday morning. And so I caught it there and then went back and started watching it. But the broadcast episodes have the original music.
Right.
It's just the streaming that doesn't. And so I saw it on the broadcast on TNT, and then I got the DVDs, and that's when, so for a long time, I didn't even own the first season on streaming because for me, it's got 2 AC/DC songs and Ramblin' Man in the pilot, so it's like.
Yeah.
Well, what surprised me was when I did the 15-year retrospective for Winchester Family Business on the essential episodes as ranked by Entertainment Weekly. I went through and I looked at the music in the episodes that were picked as essential or not essential, because there were some songs that were very memorable whose episodes didn't get selected as being essential. Well, I was amazed at how many episodes didn't have any music at all. And I guess that's how they could afford, some of the name brand stuff they used elsewhere. But you think you hear it throughout all of them, and it's actually really not there. But I wanted to make sure we bridged between the ambient music and the character's experience of music with Carry On, because it's both. And that scene with the musical, when we see Sam and Dean see themselves in those lyrics for maybe the first time, and the way it hits them is just magic.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've heard, and maybe you have too, Jared and Jensen talk about their experience as actors being Sam and Dean, experiencing listening to that, and how emotional they got because at the thought of Sam and Dean like experiencing this, something that was already meaningful to Jared and Jensen, but not to Sam and Dean. So they said they got really emotional. They set it up so that they didn't experience it until the actors walked into that school auditorium. They didn't let them hear it beforehand. They said it, I'm sure it was Phil Segretia. I don't know who directed it, but I feel like it must be either Bob Singer or Phil Segretia. And they set it up so that they wouldn't know beforehand. So they literally had the experience of walking in that auditorium and hearing them singing. Jay Gruska went up there to do that episode. So he was up there and actually worked with the actors who were doing the actual vocals. So music was, I mean, such a big part of that episode, but they knew that Jared and Jensen were going to have an emotional reaction, and they did.
Wow.
Yeah. Amazing.
Well, and there are so many of those iconic songs that we've heard that the characters weren't experiencing, but like Styx, Renegade, and Famous Final Scene, and God Was Never on Your Side. I mean, especially that last one, when it opened and it starts into that music, and I'm going, oh, seriously, guys? God was never on your side. You have just pulled my heart out of my chest. How perfect.
Oh, yeah, perfect, perfect song. Perfect song.
What are
Well,
some
that
of the
music
other?
is there. That music is there for us and our feelings about these things.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That was a non-diegetic. It was outside of the
Right.
action on the screen, so
Yeah.
it wasn't in the actual. They weren't hearing that. It wasn't their experience, but it was so perfect for the audience to hear that.
Same with that Brothers in Arms that now just gets me so much. I just, you know, and it's, I mean, this is far outside of the show. Like, I don't even know how to describe this, but music is a part of this show and this experience in so many ways. So Jason Fisher, one of the production people on the show, for the last couple of years of the show, would put up the call whiteboard, and there would always be a song of the day. Like, there was a song of the day every single day. And one of the songs of the day for one of the last episodes was The Night We Met, which was another song that I didn't know, but that started being in fan vids, and now I adore that. But that also is hugely emotional to me, and it is also 100% about supernatural for me now, even though it was never played on the show. It's not officially a part of the show, but to me and anyone who read the whiteboard that day and went and looked up the song, that show is now also a part of supernatural, which I don't know when that kind of thing happens on a show. That's like meta.
Yes, very, very. I think one of the best examples, though, of when they have used certainly the recaps. I can't imagine skipping the recaps, and I know people tend to do that, but not with this show. You don't skip the recaps because the All Hell Breaks Loose Part 1, when it starts with it's Boston. It was foreplay into Long Time. Foreplay, and then it has all of that, and then once it gets into the song, it's on the radio. You know, Sam and Dean pull up to that little kind of weird looking diner, but all of that from the beginning through to suddenly it's on the radio is really so well done. Again, it takes it from outside inside, and that's one of the best examples I think they have of that.
Yeah.
Another song that is hugely impactful for me, and I'm doing a rewatch, and we just finished season 1, so we just watched the season finale of season 1. I don't know if this is supposed to be playing on the car radio, or if they're hearing it or we're hearing it. But when
Also the
Creedence
Rising
Clearwater,
Sun.
no,
No.
Bad Moon Rising.
Oh,
Mhm.
Right.
When
Yeah.
I mean, is that I don't actually know if that was supposed to be on the radio, but it's so perfect.
Well, when the next episode opens up, in my time of dying, when that opens up, the song is on the radio in the truck. The
Yes, that's
trucker
what I thought.
is playing it. So yeah, but you hear it. You hear it when boys get, bashed into.
So I guess it is playing in the truck.
Oh yeah.
After the crash. And so it was on the radio, but yeah, I think in this place it was outside of the show. But then when it comes back to In My Time of Dying, when it opens, the song's still playing and it's on the trucker's radio. And just as an aside, I still feel my dad was a truck driver. So I feel so bad for that truck driver every time I see that episode when he says, did I do this, after the demon leaves? That just rips my heart out every single time I see that. Sorry, I had to say that as an aside.
Do you know that was not an actor? Do you know that story? The guy
No,
who
I
was
don't. He looks like a truck driver. Is he?
He is. He's like he was the stunt driver.
Oh.
And that when he hit the Impala, it was supposed to flip over, but it got caught up on the truck.
Okay,
So you could see the truck driver's face. And they didn't have the money to redo the crash. They couldn't do it again. So he had to come back for the first episode of the second season and play that role. And I think he was fabulous, even though he's not.
That was great. But I didn't know that. But because I always feel so bad for him.
We've all heard the stories about they wanted to get Zeppelin. Zeppelin wouldn't, let them do it. Which, wow, how not to be part of an iconic show. The other song that I don't think they ever did use, but in my head canon, it is perfect for the boys, is Bon Jovi's Blaze of Glory. And that's such a Dean song. And it never got in. It's in all the fan bits, but it's definitely not in the show.
But it's in the dialogue, and it's also
Yes.
It's in the dialogue a lot. And another way they got Zeppelin in there, a couple of times mentioning the dialogue, but also in the titles. In My Time of Dying, Stairway to Heaven, they finally got around to using that one. But there's a lot of song titles in the episode titles. And so, you can't copyright a title. So that's another brilliant way of kind of connecting music with the show. So there's a lot of song lyrics and a lot of song titles.
A lot of titles.
Mm-hmm.
That are also used on the show.
What haven't we hit? We're coming down to the end here. Come on, one way or the other.
Oh,
What
gosh,
song?
we only have 300 to choose from.
Yeah,
I know.
327.
Well, it's like when I threw out House of the Rising Sun a minute ago. It's like, even as I'm saying, I don't know. It's like they knew the song was playing. It's just beyond the. I mean, when we talk about music on the show, there's certain songs we always bring up. Obviously, Carry On, Renegade, Heat of the Moment. There's certain things that we will always think of. For me, one of the less obvious ones is simply House of the Rising Sun, used so well because that is an eerie song. For that to be the one to say something has just happened with a change in time as we're moving into the episode Roadkill, where some ghosts, somebody doesn't know they're dead, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites.
Oh,
how did we not mention Heat of the Moment?
Well, it's its own different thing, and it's not a song that reflects their preferences. It got inflicted upon them just like that day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Huey Lewis, when it finally, and they finally find out that it's Wednesday, that, it's Back in Time by Huey Lewis, which is perfect. There's so many Back to the Future references and moments in that whole series also. every time Dean goes back, there's a DeLorean reference. And so, there's always these little moments. So that show and those movies, we were doing so well. Sorry. But to have that song, and again, where he says, isn't this the most beautiful song you've ever heard? And it's like, no. So
one that gets several times, "A Spirit in the Sky," which is such an ironic song, but so perfect.
Yeah, and
that
so
one,
recognizable.
It really is. And in fact, the way they use that one is so perfect because they're walking on that bridge. The bridge has been pulled out, and Dean has a great Casey Kasem line when he says, "And the hits just keep on coming," and boom, there's the song. So, it's again, they use a lot of references, a lot of musical references where they talk about B-side, flip side, deep cuts. They use a lot of radio isms, in that. And that one is one in particular that always gets me when Dean says it, because it sounds just like a 1970s DJ, and the hits just keep on coming.
Yeah.
And that's an important point about it being radioisms, because that goes back to what we were talking earlier about when the songs became part of their lives. Whether by them or their parents, they all originally discovered these songs through radio.
Yeah. Which again is that timelessness of it, because people don't even listen to sort of old-fashioned radio with like your morning DJ anymore. So yeah, that's another part of that timelessness. I also have to say I like that they managed to use a Bowie song. I was a huge Bowie fan back in the day, so I'm very happy that they managed to get a Bowie music cue in there.
And it was so well done.
Yeah.
So well done. Every time, I can't think of any time that they haven't used the music well, and pretty much everything it's so intentionally done.
Well, and one of the other iconic scenes with music is Old Death's entrance.
Oh,
in Chicago.
Jen Titus, yes.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And then Billy's entrance, the first time we see Billy in the hospital, and she's singing, and it's eerie and it's echoing. And if you've ever worked in a hospital on the night shift, or hospitals have a different feel, and that having her sing that in that echoing corridor in the dark when the lights are on the low setting, just perfect.
Yeah, when I was in college, I worked night shift in nursing homes, and it's some of that same kind of thing. If somebody has a radio going off somewhere in the distance, there's something eerie to it.
Mm-hmm. And it always echoes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's such an eerie song. I mean, again, I've discovered, obviously a lot of the music they used I already knew and I already had associations, but I've discovered a lot of music through this show. I mean, I was not familiar with that song, certainly.
And it's, again, I talk about this in my chapter in the Death book, because I'm looking at Americana and all of the Americana pieces that the show presents itself, not just with death, but in a lot of different ways. But that particular song is an Appalachian folk song. So again, there's an American pedigree to that song. And
I remember in social media when the Wayward Sisters episode finally culminated. Didn't hear anything, but finally culminated in that big episode. The Hailstorm song. I remember social media, a whole bunch of people who I've been a fan of theirs for a long time, but a whole lot of people discovered Hailstorm and that I Am the Fire song and the rest of Lizzie Hale stuff because of Supernatural.
Yeah, including me. I didn't know that. And I was
That's
like,
right. I remember that.
this?
We talked about that at the time.
Yeah. I also never would have discovered Fare Thee Well, which now I love, and I love hearing Rob perform it at conventions, and it's so beautiful, but I had never heard that song either.
Wagon Wheel, yeah. Yeah, and Lynn, I agree with you about overriding the associations, because I was not a huge hard rock, it was hard rock before it became classic rock fan back in the day when it was coming out. But now I'm rediscovering a lot of the things that I was vaguely aware of at the time, but it wasn't what I was listening to and embracing that, which is sort of odd after all this time. But hey, thank the show.
And a whole new generation who never would have listened to that. I mean, so many young Supernatural fans who now love this music that is from way before their time. I think that's awesome. Kripke
Well,
must like be happy about that every day.
there was an interview fairly recently that they did with the folks from Kansas. And one of the singers from Kansas said, they started looking out at their audience and it started getting younger. And that doesn't happen to bands so much. And there were all these women, young women. Why? And then they kind of realized that it was the show's pull. And they were very, very grateful.
Yeah, they've embraced the show, and the show's embraced them back.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did Kansas a definite solid. But you know, I mean, like I said, I and I'm really going to sound old here, but I had Leftoverture. I had that album when it was current on 8-track. And I listened to the heck out of that, you know. I loved that whole album.
Well, Carry On was originally in Heroes, which was a Henry Winkler movie about an embittered Vietnam vet. And so that was my first exposure to the song. I did have the album, but Henry Winkler in that role was fairly Dean-esque, looking back on it in terms of being a bitter warrior. But it was an anti-war movie. So that was kind of interesting to see it get a whole new life. Well, folks, once again, we have blown through the hour, and wow, so many episodes, so many songs, but we hit some high points. So thank you all so much for being here. And let's go around one more time, let everybody know where they can find you online. Lynn?
You can find me on all social media at FangasmSPN. My blog is fangasmthebook.com, and you can find the newest books written by the actors at the website peacewhenyouaredone.com.
Great, thank you. Susan?
Well, I am not on social media in a professional way, but deathandsupernatural@gmail.com. You can get a hold of me or Mandy, and stop it. We were doing so well. I'm sorry. But deathandsupernatural@gmail.com is a great way to email me if you have questions.
Okay, and Travis?
On Twitter, I am @superherologist. You can't spell that. Just look up Travis Langley. And Facebook, Instagram, Dr. Travis Langley, Dr. Travis Langley. I'm easy to find.
Okay. And you can find me at galeseymartin.com or morganbryce.com or the Supernatural TFWNC group on Facebook. But mostly you can find me here on Continual with the Supernatural track. So thank you so much to my wonderful, wonderful panelists. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up here on Continual. So we'll see you online.